Quite frankly, you'd have to be an idiot to ignore the benefits of recycling. It's clearly a good way to reduce pollution and limit production of harmful goods by reusing resources which are already available to us. And whilst anybody in their right mind would argue that recycling, in its proper form, has a place in our society, there is a dark truth behind the industry, created intentionally to deceive ordinary people. In this video, we're going to be diving into the deep, evil scam of recycling. Now, before we have a look at what the scam actually is, we must first look at some facts and go over a brief history. When we think of recycling, many of us immediately think of plastic, but the process is nothing new. Processes such as paper recycling have been used for hundreds of years. But the push for recycling really began in the 1970s as people began to become aware and concerned of the disposable culture and the effects it had on the planet. The first waste recycling mill was created in Pennsylvania in 1972 and became the blueprint for all future recycling plants. And before long, recycling was everywhere. And quickly, that brings us up to the modern day. Now, focusing on the process of plastics recycling, this is probably one of the best and most well-known forms of recycling due to the sheer amount of plastic our society uses. The problem with plastic is that not all types of the substance are actually recyclable. And this means that there needs to be some kind of a distinguishing factor for non-recyclables, and that came in 1970. Now, you may be aware of this logo. It was invented by Gary Anderson in 1970 to distinguish recyclables. Now, the logo is clear and easy to understand and was adopted by many before long, and before long it was universally recognized. Now, you may think that you are well familiarized with this logo, but that might not be as true as you actually think, because there is an evil con happening in the plastics industry designed with the direct intention of confusing customers. You see, the problem with plastic is, like we said, not all types of the substance can be recycled. And if plastic producers were honest about this, a lot of people would be a lot more apprehensive to buy plastics, because obviously it would still have a massive impact on our planet as new plastics need to be produced constantly. So the industry did something to confuse customers and make them feel like they are indeed recycling when in actuality that may not be true. Now, like we said, this is the recycling logo. This is not. Can you spot the difference between these two logos? These two images are not iterations of the same thing at all. They are designed with two completely different purposes. Now, you see, the first image which we showed is of course the recycling code. The second one is called the resin identification code. And you see the number in the middle. And what this means is that it identifies that things are made from types of resin. Now, there are 7 different identification codes, and most of them are not recyclable materials. So the code does have its uses. Obviously, it's a good way of distinguishing recyclables from non-recyclables, but it does give the illusion, being shaped in the same way as the regular recycling symbol, that all types of plastics are able to be recycled. And this was a very clever move from the plastics industry. Now, you see, before we go into that, we have to have a quick look at a bit more on the resin identification code. Now, the code itself was introduced in the 1980s, so not long after the actual recycling code was introduced in the first place. Now, whilst it does help us to categorize the plastics into those that can be recycled and otherwise, there appears to be some trickery behind the process, because most people aren't properly informed on recycling. And obviously most people will look at both logos thinking it is the same thing. And the industry has clearly managed to pull a magnificent trick over the general public by cementing this logo with the illusion of recycling. Because again, most of these types of substances cannot be recycled in the first place. The plastics industry is worth billions of dollars, and it is in the best interests of producers to continue production. Combine this with the cost of recycling, which is very expensive, and the fact that most plastics actually wear down and become weaker in the recycling process, plastic recycling doesn't seem too appealing to companies if they want to maintain their massive profit margins. And at that point, they had to do something about it to keep themselves in business and to keep a good image with the public. And that is where we saw the image of the recycling logo being crossed with the resin identification code. Many consumers had the dream of seeing plastic production ending and going to recycling only, but this appears to be nothing more than an illusion, because it simply is not possible if we wish to continue using plastics because of the effects it has on their longevity. Big companies wanted to do something to give the illusion that their plastics were indeed recyclable and environmentally friendly, and that is where we saw this logo come in. It looks very much like the original recycling symbol, and it would be hard to believe that this is by accident. And that is a problem with the recycling industry as a whole. Not many materials are recyclable, and whilst recycling is good, the cost which comes with it means that many companies and the plastics industry as a whole simply does not want to adopt it in the way that they show us. But the plastics industry was smart, and they came up with a genius solution, a compromise. Rather than actually recycling en masse, they decided to create a logo so that consumers would feel less guilty because they would not know that these materials are actually unrecyclable. And this is where the evil story of plastic has taken us this week. Another industry promoting the illusion of sustainability, whilst continuing to practice the absolute opposite. So I hope you enjoyed, guys. That is it for this week. The video has been a little bit shorter than usual, I'm sorry about that, and it is coming out a couple of days later than usual. The reason for that is I'm a little bit ill, so obviously it was hard to make the video on the day because I basically couldn't talk. And again, to save time, because I really can't talk very well today anyway, I made it a little bit shorter, but we did cover all that we needed to. So perhaps I'll be making videos again in the week. If not, I probably will see you at the next weekend, on Sunday of course anyway. So I will see you in the next one, and I will look forward to making it. So thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you all again soon.